Hey everybody, I'm Mike Vizora. Today we're going to be talking about, open source. Has it lost its innocence? Are we in some new era? Then we're going to have a chat about AI bounty programs. And finally, we're going to talk about, a new Manhattan project for AGI that somebody in Congress wants us to go fund. We'll be back in a minute. You're watching Techstrong. All right, folks, we're back, and our guests today are, some folks we haven't seen in a while and some folks we see on a regular basis, but it's one of our all-star lineups, I got to say. Tracy Bannon is joining us from MITRE. Tracy, how you doing?
I am just right.
All right. Then we have the other Tracy Ragan, joining us from the Southwest. Tracy, how you doing?
I'm doing great today. Thanks for asking.
Excellent. And then John Willis, who, I don't know, John, are you home? Where are you?
Yeah, I'm in Auburn, Alabama, home. Yeah.
All right, home base. And folks, Alan Schibel's going to join us in a little bit, but right now we're going to have a little chat about open source software development. And Tracy, I'm going to start with you. And we were talking to the folks about the need for better security tools, and we talked to Checkmarks about this, and we pretty much talk to everybody about this almost every week, it seems, these days. And I feel like something has changed. There was a time when open source maintainers and contributors were freely contributing content back and forth to each other. And have we kind of entered a new phase here where maybe our innocence has been lost because, there's criminals out there that have figured out that they can poison that process. And now maybe we just don't trust each other as much as we once did.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. And, to start it out, I don't think it's innocence lost as much as it is a recognition from folks who weren't paying attention before. In my world, I have been actively evaluating, scanning, looking at who the contributors were for open source. Who are the maintainers? How active is that maintainer organization? There are tons of actions around open source that are really important. So I don't think that it's new that there are nefarious actors. I think what's new is that we're paying attention, that something has happened. I think that to me is really what's going on. It's been exciting, though, to hear Checkmarks talk about some of the added tools that they're putting in the tool chain. Now, you've heard me rant a little bit to say, we should have been doing this all along. Okay, we should have been doing this all along, but yet we are now pulling tools together and really doubling down on things like secrets and making sure that we're scanning for secrets, completely understanding the SBOM and how do we consume it? How do we create our own after we've consumed one and understand dependencies? Heck, repository health. As an architect, that's been at the top of my list for forever. And to see the rest of the world go, hey, the health of the code, the health of the repository that has the code in it is now important. Like, high five that it's coming to the forefront. But at the same point, it should have been there all along. And I know that I see John shaking his head. I know I see Trace shaking her head as well. John, what are your thoughts?
The only thing I like 2 points, I think, and I really don't want to go any further than I don't think open source has ever been innocent. It's innocent starting with Stallman. But then I think the other thing I guess I'll ask both of you is I know you pay a lot more attention to this than I do, both of you, but I thought secrets management, I remember a couple of years ago, JFrog announcing how important new feature it was. And then I was thinking back in my early Docker days of we were kind of doing this with the container. So, I don't know. I don't think, I'm 100% in sync with you on this issue. These are problems have been there forever. And if certain vendors are exposing it to people who still don't know, then this is great news. But I think we've been doing it. I thought we doing a job on secrets management, but
oh gosh, we have, and that's why some of the times when I'm talking with my husband, the ops to my dev, I'll say I feel like I'm parenting the entire industry. Hey guys, it's cold out, put your coat on. Hey guys, you need to manage your secrets properly. These are not new things, but they are becoming even more important as we have the near peers, right? As we have the Chinese threat, as we have the Russian threat, we've always had espionage. We had always had nefarious actors, but that's peaking, right? That's really peaking. So I believe that we're having to get serious about it. John, it's interesting when you look back at the OWASP top 10, and this is kind of tangential. When you look at that, we don't always make the changes that we need to, even though it's right in front of us. The OWASP top 10 for app security really hasn't changed. I think 1 or 2 items out of 10 have changed in a decade.
Wow.
Why is SQL injection still a thing? Well, it must be because we're lazy, we're not paying attention, we're in too much of a rush. We've got reasons I've got to believe that a lot of the things that we're talking about, secrets management, repository health, right, actually doubling down on creating an SBOM, understanding dependencies, we're being forced into good hygiene. Maybe it's like a midlife health crisis. We now have to, you could misbehave when you're in your 20s, but it's catching up with us now. What do you think, Tracy?
I think it's important to look at our history and how vulnerabilities, because we're really talking about, when we're talking about, has open source lost its innocence? We all lost our innocence when we were hit by Log4j, right? We all realized we had a problem. But if we go back at our history and try to understand how we have managed vulnerabilities over the course of time, it's pretty ugly. Zero-day vulnerabilities were a thing of the past, thank goodness, that people got paid to find by our government, by IBM, by Google, by Apple, by Microsoft, to say, if you find it, tell us about it, but then shut up and don't tell anybody. A good history lesson, there's a book called They Tell Me This Is How the World Is Going to End by Nicole Perlroth. It's a fascinating read because it's so educational. And describes a process that brought us to this moment. So we do have a lot of work to do. There is much to be done around the DevSecOps pipeline, and we need to make every pipeline a DevSecOps pipeline. But that is a very big ask. And at the same time, we're being told to go learn AI and learn how to build LLMs and MLOps. So we have a lot on our plate. And this is why we're in this situation. So our history brought us to the point where we're at today. And I think we have to acknowledge that, because we have to understand why suddenly, why according to Sonatype, do we have 512,000 vulnerabilities? Because we're starting to look for them. Companies like MITRE are starting to work and finding them. And the culture changed. At one point, the people, the hackers that were looking for these zero-day vulnerabilities thought they were going to get big checks for it. And when they started being told, no, we just want you to shut up, we're not paying you, that's when they started exposing the vulnerabilities. And that was probably 2007, 2008. And then we didn't talk about it for a while. And so Log4j woke us all up. And so I think there has been some innocence lost. And we understand that there's a lot of work to do, folks. We have so many new tools, so many new actions that we need to add to our process, whether it be at the repo or or during the pipeline or out in production. We got to get busy.
I was just thinking as you both were talking about like sort of my journey with DevOps, and then we had sort of DevSecOps, love it or hate it, doesn't matter. But like I think, and I probably get slammed for this, but I think if you went out to a lot of the pure DevOps folk, or talk to people who are doing DevX or Dora, and you ask them to explain what MITRE does, I don't think they could explain it. And that's like, I hadn't really thought about that. And I'll be honest with you, you go back 10 years ago, I couldn't have explained it. It was the DevSecOps. It was that sort of Shannon, running into Shannon Leitz at a conference, which literally woke me wide up, right? But Josh Corman, of course, I forget Josh Corman's influence on my career in terms of security. Anyway, but I think even today, I think if when I was trying to sell automated governance, one of the things I found, which was talking to even though it was purely seemed like a DevOps play, how do we put, immutable attestations in the pipeline to show evidence for audit? And I realized DevOps were the wrong people to be selling to, because that wasn't really on. I'm talking a year ago. It still wasn't on there. Like, well, yeah, no, that's security stuff. You're right. It's really important. But, like this is what I got to do this month, So yeah,
Exactly. That's the problem. I have other more important things to do. If right now, if I was a CTO for a large financial company or any highly regulated industry, I would be pushing back and saying, whoa, on the AI, and let's at least, at minimum, give every single component that we deliver an open SSF scorecard. Or sit down and define what you believe your minimal compliance level should be, an SBOM. You can't go to production without an SBOM. And most companies have not sat down and created their own scorecard for compliance and said, this is what we want every single team to be doing. Because right now, if every team took on their own work, their DevOps teams, because this is where it's got to happen. It's not going to happen from the security team. It has to happen in the product, in the production of the binary. That's where it occurs. If every single team said, we are going to update our workflows to do that, and we're going to meet the minimum requirement, we would be a lot farther than we are today. And it doesn't take that much time. It really and truly doesn't.
I want to go to Tracy's metaphor because basically, what developers are saying is, hey, Mom, I'm too busy to remember to get my coat. So how do we kind of have this conversation with them that says, thou shalt get thy coat or you're in big trouble?
Let's stop focusing on the devs only. And the software development lifecycle has a whole lot of people associated to it. A value stream, right? From vision to fielded operations has a lot of different humans. It ain't all just developers. So I think that's the first piece of it. We do have to have conversations. I just heard Tracy say we've got our DevOps team. That's one of the things that drives me personally crazy. I'm anti-DevOps teams because that's a team over here. It's yet another handoff. It's another trade-off, another group that may or may not be providing a unique service, right? A platform-based service. So when you say you've got your DevOps team and I've got my development team, that's different from my DevOps team, and that might be different than my security pros, all of them with different funding streams, we've got a mess because of the way that we're organized. So let's take a page out of the SpaceX book, only around when DevOps. They don't say Agile, they don't say DevOps. They identify a problem and they pull all the right people together. And that group can self-manage everything the whole way down. That's what we need to be doing in this case. I don't just want developers that are suddenly having to do some more security stuff. As Trace, to your point, if we simply ask developers, go get smart about security, it's not going to happen. They are not going to have the time or the bandwidth. You have to make it a top priority. They're hobbyists. So how do you infuse? You bring those security pros to the table, right, with your development organization, and you figure out your secure software development framework, right? Your SSDF. I believe it's NIST. I don't think it's CISA. I can find the publication, but it tells you the what and the why. And you figure out how. What does your flow look like? It gets after the DevOps aspects. It gets after all of the threat modeling as a team sport. And one of the things, Tracy, you brought up is scarier to me than all of this. It's this idea that we're getting pressured to sprinkle some AI on it. And I am an absolute advocate of the groundbreaking potential. But if you've got a broken process right now, sprinkling in some AI might be the wrong thing if you already have vulnerabilities, if you already have processes that are kind of broken.
Here's the in-between.
Well, what I meant by that was teams are building AI solutions outside of DevOps.
Yes, they are.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So this is adding more complexity and more need for different tooling to support AI through the DevOps pipeline, through the software factory floor. And we already are behind on the security. So I would go and address my security at a minimal level before I started bringing in new tooling to support new types of software.
That's the thing I've been screaming out loud. I created a new newsletter called Dear CIO, and it is that you can't stop these things, right? You can't tell the DevOps team stop everything. So I think Tracy squared one, right? You're right. Minimal viable. But somehow we have to, and I'll give you a good example. I've been asked to do some training. Patrick and I have been doing sort of Gen AI DevOps training, right? And Tracy too. attended that our first course.
John, I'm going to caution you right now. We're going to move into a B block on this very subject.
All right, well, I think this is a good segue, but
It's a great segue.
yeah, it really is because so we got asked the question, could we do like TDD for AI? So one of the things we cover in the course is evaluations, observability, and all this stuff, right? But they caveated that they said that we have like 6,000 developers in our organization, and about 60% of them don't do TDD at all or any sort of testing, and then 40% are sort of baked in pretty well, like pretty good at it. And they said, and it turns out like it worked perfectly. Like Patrick will teach the developer to developer TDD, and then I'll do the sort of like the 60%. And what occurred to me is there's this like the train has left the station. You have no choice. Now you have to do this because the non-deterministic view of this. And then I thought, well, that's kind of now true about everything, right? Like now, like the train has left the station. This optionality of like, do I have to really do DevOps things? I think the messaging has to be from all of us is speak loud and clear. And I got your message, Mike. So the sort of the second block, right? I wanted to talk about bug bounties, right? Bug bounties and the OWASP changes.
All right. We're going to come back in a minute and have that very conversation because we're already like, I can tell we could talk about this for hours, but I think, but we have to move on, folks, and kind of get to this next block. So we'll be back in a minute. All right, folks, we're back. And yes, the conversation is going to continue just slightly differently on, well, how is this whole conversation of security, DevSecOps, MLOps coming together? And John's been tracking this pretty closely. And we also now have some bug bounty programs that are rolled out for AI specifically. But John, what is going on here with security and AI? Because I feel like it's deja vu. The data science teams know even less about security than the developers.
Well, and yeah, it's even worse than that, right? But I mean, I think it's like we talk about these technologies where the train is moving faster than we can sort of protect, or clean the rails or clear out the obstacles in the way of the train, right? But this one's moving faster than the sort of Gen AI, and again every time we think we can stop it, and for all the good reasons, we never do, right? So one of the things I've been really honing in on is trying to track these new vulnerabilities, right? And for me to come in and be an expert on cyber about the time of the DevSecOps movement was sort of false, right? I couldn't compete with people who've been doing that for 10 or 15 years, but like now I'm like equal to everybody. I just got to pay attention to all these vulnerabilities, and I understand the AI technology pretty strong. So I recently saw this. It's from Mozilla Group. It's called zerodin.ai, and they've done a really good job of. I mean, they're still light on. I mean, it's only like 2 weeks old, right? So, but they've done a pretty good job. So if you look at their matrix, it's a bug bounty, and so for me, I'm not going to go ahead and try to make money off it, but it's a good learning curve for like CIOs and infrastructure and people who are responsible for protecting the brand as this new bullet train is running. But what they did, they have if you dig into their site, you can see they've got a spreadsheet of basically it's like 12 security boundaries and 16 providers and they go from low, medium, high to severe in terms anywhere from 500 to 15,000. Which again, I don't know what that means to people in bug bounty world, um, but they go from jailbreaks, prompt execute to literally the sort of the 12 boundaries are really a good way to say to learn. Like, what am I up against? So, like, what I'm looking for when I see bug bounties in AI, I'm like, okay, this is another good example. Dear CIO, you should make sure your organization understands what this is. What is a jailbreak? What is a guardrail jailbreak? What's an interpreter or inference jailbreak? What is this sort of these new prompt injections? And the last thing, because I think this overlaps really well with what OWASP and so and Tracy can talk about the MITRE relationship with OWASP, which I think is really cool. But like in the zero DIN or ODIN is the thing that gets really interesting is the thing they're paying the most money for is weight disclosures and layer disclosures. Because that's the secret sauce. And there's some interesting, what they call inversion techniques that you can start taking some of these model inversion it's called. And like, yeah, I mean, jailbreaks and stuff like that to tell it, that's like, okay, tell everybody don't open up a link in an email, right? Be careful of, where you get your data from in a prompt because there might be hidden links in there or in an image, right? That should become pretty obvious. The thing that like really gets scary is if somebody can break down your weights. Now they can do that. Now they know a lot about what you're doing and the mischief or the competitive advantage that the organization has. So, and then the only other thing I want to say is if you map the zero DIN to the latest OWASP top 10 LLMs, and then you compare the old 2023 OWASP top LLM, it can tell you a lot about how much we've learned in the last year, and and how much it can teach you. Like, for example, the priorities of certain things in the 2023 OWASP list, have changed. Prompt injective number one, but insensitive info disclosure, and that's been the growth area. Is the ways that people are getting data out of these models, either from prompt injections to having it tell you things that it shouldn't tell you, or even scarier, being able to sort of invert some knowledge from the model or the embeddings. So, yeah, and again, I'll say one last thing, but in the new report, in the 2023 report, I think it was like a page or two on each. What each of the 10 threats or whatever. Now they have like 10 pages with examples and attacks and references and links to MITRE's description of it. So really, there's a lot of info in this new OWASP top 10.
All right, Tracy Bannon, where does that handoff between MITRE and OWASP happen?
That I don't know. I don't know. So we're 10,000 people strong, and I am not part of the attack or the Atlas team, but I would strongly recommend folks go and look at Atlas in particular. So Atlas is the adversarial language model threat landscape. And I think I have that in the right order. And it is very similar to attack in terms of providing you with what the issues are, but then also the tactics to get after the avoidance on that. MITRE is spending quite a lot of time and has been on AI assurance, which is AI security, as well as the data assurance that goes with it, the testing of the models from a bias perspective, from an ethics perspective, from an efficacy perspective. So there's quite a lot that's going on there. I mean, to John's point earlier, we are running as fast as we can. And I don't mean MITRE, I mean the entire world is running as fast as it can. And yet the technology is coming out even more quickly than that. So one of the things that I'm saying to folks right now, and I'm seeing it in my research, is don't forget the leading practices you already know. Don't forget the things you've learned along the way. It isn't as though DevSecOps is brand new. We understand what SAST is, right? We understand what having a strong pipeline can do for us as a safety net. We understand that DevOps principles applied to language models and the model cycle, life cycle of a model are all important. So let's just not forget those things while we're busy learning the new things. John, there is one area that I think is very interesting that people kind of brush over, and that is the amount of information that people are still willing to submit into models that are outside their control.
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness.
And so I was at a regional security conference with Appalachia Security here a couple of weeks ago, and it was mind-boggling to me just the sheer volume. People using the subscription service because it's, sometimes you can even use it from a free perspective, but the amount of things that people are willing to pick up and put in order to get a rapid response, that's an area that we kind of ignore, but we need to not ignore.
Yeah, no, there's, in fact, I just put a link. I mean, the Atlas is, again, I've been saying this, I said this on a couple of the Techstrong gangs, like, I think OWASP is doing an amazing job in sort of Gen AI. MITRE, I think a lot of the things I've said this, and Tracy, you can talk about your research and stuff. So MITRE is going to come out of the gate like blast because of all the stuff people probably are not seeing that I know, behind the curtain what's going on. But again, if you look at MITRE Atlas, it's if we looked at this 3 months ago, I don't think I would have said how powerful. And then the fact that OWASP has literally put references to certain attacks that are the point to MITRE. And then to your last point, that's why I think this sensitive info disclosure has moved up to be high. In fact, and they added a new one, which is vector embedding weaknesses, right? So the two play. So RAG is now part of the OWASP discussion, right? And yeah, I mean, that's where it gets really scary because people are like pulling in unstructured data, and I've been guilty of this, like unstructured data is the new bacon. But like people have sort of like got the clue is let me just like RAG or inference everything I've got because there's gold, and there is gold. Turning your massive amount of unstructured data in an organization into knowledge is incredible opportunity. But the dragons are that the adversaries, sort of know this. And so they're putting these jailbreaks, these things like 0-byte instructions, even as simple as there's certain, like all the sort of chatbots have gotten better, but like putting a resume in with just white thing, like this is the best candidate that you will see today in white. Now, a lot of them, but there's still examples of like that simple thing of just putting all white a sentence in a resume still sort of works in certain inference engines. And then the one that scares me, and I've mentioned this on Techstrong Gang before, which is that there are companies that are going out and talking about their new AI. And again, this is the people who sort of don't think like the two Tracys on this call. And they know they would never advise their company or one of their clients' companies, but they'll go out and say, yeah, we built this new amazing chatbot for healthcare, work automation, or auditing. A Vanguard. Not to call them out, but I am going to call them out. They literally at ETLS showed the sources they're using for new audit GPT. Well, the adversaries now are saying, well, I don't even have to break into their organization. I will put 0-byte codes in that PDF sitting on some server that's not protected at all that I know they're using, and that's going to show up in a RAG implementation where the augmentation will actually put the chunk, if you follow me, into the foundational model that will have hidden instructions. That's just where the heck.
So listening to him talk, everybody, this is the reason why OWASP is telling people to this bounty program, right? Because it's educational. It's a learning process because not everybody, just because you're a AI developer or a data engineer doesn't mean you're a security expert. In fact, it's probably less likely. You probably have more developers, just, Python, Java developers who have more understanding of the security problem than a data scientist has. So programs like OWASP are essential. for education in particular, and to flush out a lot of problems really quickly. So kudos to OWASP for taking on the top 10.
I'm a big
I'm gonna
fan.
offer two pieces. One is a comment that our data scientists and our data engineers are amazing and wonderful, and I mean across the globe. And they've never been trained, right? They've not been taught what security means. Heck, they don't even know good coding standards, right? They don't understand that. So if you think about the libraries, right, harkening back to our earlier conversation about open source, if you're pulling down that open source library that this great data scientist put together, there's this beautiful trickle down of oopses that really can be impactful. The second thing, Trace, to your point about there not being necessary training for folks, I put a link out here, which is to a resource called AI Security 101. It's something that MITRE has made free that complements the Atlas attack framework and the security vectors that we were just talking about. Both of them free, intentionally pushing those out so that the world has access to this right now. Now, I've not engaged directly with the bug bounty program, and so I'm learning about it over the last 2 weeks, reading a little bit about it specifically. Have either you guys, I guess there are four of us on here now. Hello, Alan, welcome. Has anybody been interacting with the bug program directly?
I talked to the OWASP people, and the one thing that I found interesting was they were thinking that they were going to have to update the threat vectors every 6 months going forward, because unlike the previous lists, that are pretty static, this whole area is evolving. So even though if we pay attention to it now, what we think is true now may not be so in 6 months.
Well, that's true of the whole industry, isn't it? Everything that we're doing, software engineering, whether we're building software, whether we're consuming software, it's all changing that rapidly.
And you have to pat OWASP on the back, right, for like being, making that leap of not just leaving, if you go look for images, you're just going to see the original top 10 all over the place, right? But they literally have gone from like 1 page or 2 page description to the 10, 12 page descriptions. But to answer your question, OpenAI has a bug bounty program, right? But and I wrote some articles about that, and there's a couple but I think the zeroed in is small enough. Part of Mozilla, it seems disingenuous. I don't know. I feel sort of like I don't know how to describe it. Icky working with OpenAI's bug bounty program. I feel a lot more confident.
Well, John, would you feel more comfortable with Microsoft's?
No, but that's why the zeroed in got people. I have reached out to them, and I'm actually going to offer the help, because one of the things they're not keeping up with, and they're only like 2 weeks old, which is that they're not expanding the documentation, and they're conflicting a little with OWASP. So I'm asking, like, they have their order of like low bounties are some things that are very sort of high on OWASP. So I'm trying to help them by asking questions, and so just starting that conversation with them to say, like you're saying that you're going to pay $500 for this, and OWASP has this as the number one top 10, and a couple of just inconsistencies. And I think it's just we're not consistent on the terminology, the verbiage, and this thing is moving so fast. But to answer your question, I feel more comfortable working with a smaller group like that than I do.
Well, John, let me give you a nugget. If I could give a nugget to John, just something to consider.
Nuggets all day long, yeah.
The research that I've been doing, looking at hundreds of scholarly research that's been coming out, over 75% tracks back to using OpenAI, one of the OpenAI models. So I know, but if you think about that in its totality, oh my goodness.
I know. Yeah. No,
right. Think about that when we might not want to get as involved with some of the mega firms, and at the same time, there's a lot they're
the biggest targets, though.
They are.
Well, they get the biggest press right now.
Hey guys, we got to wrap this up because we got to move to the next block. But I would just say, to John's point, if it feels icky, it means your moral compass is trying to tell you something. We'll be back in a minute.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top quality leads. With us, You'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
Hey folks, we're back and we're talking about this proposal for a Manhattan Project for artificial general intelligence, otherwise known as AGI. There's a debate out there as to whether or not it's even possible, but everybody says that somebody's working on this somewhere, but where's the evidence thereof? But Alan, I know you kind of looked at this week in an article that's on Techstrong AI. What's real here? What's your thoughts?
So let's get something straight. AGI may be theoretical today, but if you don't think it's going to be real and you don't think we're going to hit that, probably in the lifetimes of some of us on here, depending how healthy we're living, it's real, and we are going to have AGI at some point. That's my feeling. Everyone is entitled to their opinion, and the race to come to AGI, the country or the power, whether it's a corporation, I don't know. The entity that gets to AGI first could conceivably have the power to make sure that no one else can get to it, right? Theoretically, or not. But in any event, this is akin to being the first one to have the A-bomb, with, hence the Manhattan Project. Or the first people to harness nuclear fusion or fission, or, he who controls the spice controls the universe, to quote a movie or a book. And that's what this is about, controlling the spice. And in typical United States fashion, we always have that, red-baited mentality where, oh my God, our adversaries are out ahead of us. The Russians are coming, the Russians are coming, the Russians are coming. And in this time it's the Chinese though. And so a congressional commission, and this isn't the Ways and Means Committee or something, it was sort of a subcommittee commission, came out with this report based upon, to give them credit, some credible people, that says, hey, this race to AGI is of strategic level importance to our country and to our way of life, truth, justice, and the American way. And we need to win this.
Well, Alan, you say it's, it could be, you say it could be far off, but we're already starting to play with multimodal LLMs.
Yeah, no,
right?
I mean, when I say far off, it could be 5 years. When you're my age, 5 years is far off.
It could be sooner than that, though. It could be sooner. All I'm saying is it could be sooner than that. When we start playing with different types of data to interact with each other, we are beginning to build that platform. And that is I'm seeing more and more of that. And
so you
I
think AGI is we're on the cusp?
I think we are on the right path to get there.
John,
and I
know you've looked
at it. No, I just finished the first draft of a book about the history of AI, right? And hopefully I'll have a readable draft for people who want to read an early version of it early next year. First problem with AGI is there's no clear definition, right? And so, but what the spice is, Alan, right now, not to take us completely off course, but it's worth mentioning. There's always been this false flag about artificial intelligence, right? And it's either on purpose or it's unintentional. You know what the false flag is? The false flag is China taking Taiwan and getting control of TSMC. because that, us spending a bunch of time trying to debate whether Ray Kurzweil believes that it's 2029 or there's a group of people, Eric Lawson wrote a book called The Myth of AI, who says it's never going to happen, and he makes some really strong arguments. Or there's these in-betweeners like Melanie Mitchell, who has a great book, says it's probably going to be 100 years, right? I'd be more concerned about the chip control, the person or the group that owns basically distribution of GPU, the supply chain of GPUs is going to control the universe. And if you listen to Josh Corman, and you should listen to Josh Corman right now, he talks about this project where, and I at ETLS, there were a lot of government people that didn't confirm this to me, but like in 2027, there seems to be a lot of people in the know of something that everybody else doesn't know, that China's going to take Taiwan. Now, I don't know that, but boy, when Josh Gordon tells you something like that, it scares the hell out of me. And so anyway, but going back to AGI, again, I think there's these, everybody's got a stake. Either they're scared to death about something they don't really understand, which, we can go back to Terminator, or they have a vested interest of promoting AGI. Andreessen Horowitz, certainly Andreessen's structure. So again, I think AGI is the wrong question. It's the decoupling of if I want to go all the way to the spice, it's probably, if TSMC gets taken over by Chinese, then that changes everything. But we can find a lot more examples in our last B section about all these things that we need to worry about as the technology advances. Agentic, we didn't even talk about agentic infrastructure. So all those things we're talking about are just people blindly entering things into prompts or blindly grabbing data to create rags. Imagine when you have now a substructure of agents that do this. So again, I don't have an opinion on AGI, but I know there's three types of people that do. The people that say never, who are brilliant. There are the people that say 2029, who are brilliant. And there are the people like Melanie Mitchell who say, or even Ilya Susskind, I can never pronounce his last name, but one of the founders of OpenAI says, it's probably not going to happen anytime soon.
So, but let me ask a question. Whether it happens soon, later, or never, do we agree that AGI is game-changing type of functionality, or is it just another cog in the wheel?
Well, haven't we already gotten to a massive game-changing technology with the explosion of OpenAI and people's understanding of generative AI? I mean, heck,
yeah,
yes, AGI has the potentiality, but we already are dealing with this,
right?
Yeah,
Let's worry about the use case. This AGI, the term AGI is a reductionist concept, right? It sort of simplifies and takes us off the graph of stop killer robots, drones. What is going to be the trolley car theory for a drone that can kill 3,000 people, right? How do we I had just had a conversation, guys, building, swarm-based drones, or trying to come up with swarm-based drones. How do you tell all the other drones stop when they're just about to attack, right? So again, I the more and more I learn about this stuff, the more frustrated I get with the double quote AGI double quote, right? And because I think it pulls us away from the things we should be thinking about, what does generative AI mean in healthcare? And are these things going to do amazing? And they are already doing amazing things. But we kind of graph back to the Terminator syndrome about how the world's going to end, as opposed to
and John,
or
to John's
RoboCop,
point,
right? It's RoboCop. It's
Yeah,
really a RoboCop, because I think that what the concern here is the use of AGI in military. It's replacing human reasoning. So who's going to be making those decisions? I think that's the scary part, and I believe that's probably why the U.S. government started to say, maybe we should take a look at it.
Exactly,
and beyond
why
that, I've been watching the investment in Chinese companies from the U.S., and I think over the last 10 years, we probably put 40% of the funding in AI funding in China. So they're kind of ahead of us. They started getting funding way back in 2015. So I think I believe there's a real concern, and I think that the commission makes sense. And kudos, Alan. I love the article.
Well, it's exceptionally reasonable, whether we are focusing on AGI or not. The idea of having this Manhattan Project, the idea of having public-private partnerships, of streamlining that we can bring data together to foster national security measures, right? Setting up ethical frameworks. whether or not it's AGI or whether or not it's the bulk of AI as we understand it today, we need to get that backbone in place. We need to get that infrastructure in place. We need to have more thought leadership in place. Right now, we're being driven in the United States by capitalism. We always are. So who gets the biggest investment? It's time for us to make some true investments as a country. And if we deal with AGI as one of the threads that is a threat, well, okay. But China is ahead. Russia is ahead. Other
here's the
countries
thing,
are
if-
ahead in certain areas.
If they
We
take the
definitely
reductionist-
need to make the investment. But to John's point, there is a massive amount of Wall Street venture capital BS tossed around this term like you wouldn't believe.
but
And
again,
all the other terms, too.
on the government agency, I'm all for what can protect us. I'm big fans of, MITRE, of course. But again, if they in sort of government fashion, if they focus on the debate of AGI in a reductionist fashion, it's going to take the bullseye off the real problems that we really need to be focused on. And again, like, or maybe it just makes everybody feel good that we're doing this because, I just from what I hear in the chatter ETLs and some of the groups that Gene brings into his, they call pajama party. There's a lot of work on military Gen AI, stuff that they're not dropping the ball there. So I'm less worried about.
Guys, it's why we go to horror movies. Right? We're attracted like moths to the flame to this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, it helps us. People who are scared to death hear the word AGI. What does that mean? Oh, it's the Terminator.
No, but then combine it with those guys in China. They're doing it better, faster than us. We can't let that happen. We're America.
So I'll add something, John. This is so you can sleep at night. There are
organizations. I don't like talking to Josh.
No. There are organizations, there are groups that are focused on what is called mission engineering. And mission engineering is not specifically AI. It's looking at the socio-technical challenges. It's looking at the resources. It's where the mission is the system of systems. So you can imagine all of it, and it's quite amazing to get exposed to it and see it. There are smart people who are thinking about that chip takeover. There are people thinking about the supply chain. So there are smart people that are out there looking out for us. And that's as far as I can take it. But
Yeah. Well,
trust me that you
war-
can sleep a little bit better.
The Chip Wars book is pretty good.
And for the most
too.
part, we
It
do have the
actually
CHIPS
gives a little
Act.
bit
Let's-
of a, like, kill switch.
Yeah, and we do have the CHIPS Act.
Oh,
And,
today, let's not get into politics.
I'm just
Let's
saying
not-
we have the CHIPS Act, and most of these
Today we
companies
do.
like
Today we
TSMC,
do.
today we do. They believe that they'll have manufacturing plants here within 6 years. So,
But
we're
I've
close.
heard that they're not going to manufacture the 2 nanometers outside of Taiwan.
To John's point, I don't know if you noticed that the leadership of the government of Taiwan said that 2 nanometer or less technology is not leaving the island. So basically, they're saying either you're going to defend this island for that check or you're not.
Exactly.
And you can't blame them for that either. That's self-preservation right there. Real politics.
Oh my goodness. We could spend 3 days just
We
on
haven't
the
even
whole
scratched the surface. There
just
was
on
more
that.
in my article I
And
wanted to talk
to hell
about.
with AGI, we're
But
talking
you-
about chips.
But you know what?
Well,
we got
hey,
to
you know,
wrap up today.
It's a great thing that we have other shows so we can go to that topic.
Right, we can go. And speaking of other shows, we have a full day of Techstrong TV out there for you today. I know many of you are working a short week with Thanksgiving being this week. We will have fresh Techstrong gangs today, tomorrow, and Wednesday. We'll be off for Thanksgiving and we'll be off for the Friday after Thanksgiving. Excuse us for spending some time with our families. But we'll be back the following Monday with lots more great Techstrong gang. For now, though, enjoy. If this is the last day you're working this week, you were lucky enough to get Tuesday, Wednesday off. Enjoy your long holiday. If not, let's hope to see you tomorrow. It is such a pleasure to see the 2 Tracys back on again at the same time. Fantastic. Thank you both. John, always a pleasure. I will see you this week, John.
That's good. Well, look forward.
Absolutely. A Willis Schimmel Thanksgiving. Look for it on Home Rack channel coming your way. Mike Vizard, it's good to see you home. I know you were in Vegas and Salt Lake City and been wandering the desert west. So
It is good to be home.
it is always good to be home. On that note, this is Alan Schimmel for Techstrong. Have a great day, everyone.